Hey, what is up everybody? It's Animac here for Anime Uproar, and Horikoshi just trolled everyone. New characters suddenly joined the battle, and the truth about the civilians who were hiding out at UA, including Deku's mom, may have just taken an extremely dark turn. On top of that, I think that Dekus Dad may be finally coming back from the store after getting the milk. There is a lot to talk about, tons of twists and turns, so let's get into it. You guys know how this works. If you enjoy our videos and you want to see more MHA videos in the future, leave a quick like and comment right now. It only takes you a second, but it helps us with that YouTube algorithm. And if you're one of the over 50% of people who watch our videos regularly but still haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, do me a big favor and subscribe right now. If you want to do me an even bigger favor, you can also hit that bell and select the option that says all. Finally, this video will contain MHA manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. The last few chapters were marked by the heroes receiving some very unexpected reinforcements from a number of former villains, including Gentle, La Brava, and Lady Nagant. They all decided to join the fight on the UA battlefield on the side of the heroes. The previous chapter also revealed that Shigaraki knew all along what All For One's real plan was, and he hated the idea of becoming nothing more than All For One's tool. But because he couldn't resist All For One openly, he secretly planned a way to fight back. He did this by hiding away his own tragic origins deep within his heart, and then waiting for the right moment to release his true personality and overcome All For One's control. Tomura Shigaraki and Tenko Shimura still share one goal, and it is a goal that has nothing to do with All For One's ambitions or with stealing One For All. Shigaraki wants to destroy everything that made what happened in his childhood home possible, and it is that desire to destroy everything that his childhood home represents that really keeps him going. At the end of the last chapter, Deku and Shigaraki were just about to begin their final battle on the ground. But even though Deku forced Shigaraki to get off of the UA floating structure and get down to the ground, the UA is still in danger of plummeting down and killing everyone who is still there. And that is exactly where the latest chapter picks up. Although he managed to prevent the collapse of the UA temporarily, Gentle is now struggling to keep it up as the elasticity of his quirk reaches its limits. Despite being powered up by La Brava's immense love, Gentle has reached the limit of his abilities, and it looks like he's seconds away from being crushed to death, along with everyone else who is still inside the UA. And honestly, I'm glad Horikoshi brought some more focus on this, because when we first saw Gentle saving the UA, I did feel like this feat was way beyond anything I would have expected from him and his quirk, at least based on everything we knew up to that point in time. Now, of course, yes, La Brava is using her quirk to heavily boost his power. And now that they've found each other again, I'm sure her love is even stronger than ever before. But still, I'm glad that Gentle isn't just like easily holding up the entire UA only with his quirk. He's definitely struggling and he's at the end of his rope, and La Brava is rushing to get the UA's systems back online before Gentle is killed alongside everyone else. So yeah, as I said, Gentle is really pushing himself to the limit, and even though he is staring death in the face, he feels the joy of life filling up his heart. Now, there are no cameras here, and no one even knows that he's the one holding the UA up. In the past, Gentle always wanted cameras and an audience. He wanted fame and notoriety. But now that he's risking his life with no one even being aware that he's there, allows him to understand what a true hero feels. This is real selfless and self-sacrificing heroism, and this knowledge fills Gentle with joy. Now, of course, we know that Gentle is wrong. Deku and the others did realize that Gentle was the one who saved the UA, and a couple of students from the UA management department start peeking out of the building and they begin filming Gentle with their smartphones. Gentle yells at them to get back inside because it's too dangerous, but the students reply that they're just doing their job. Part of their job is to manage public relations between the heroes and the public, and yet the entire hero society failed to do that after the last disastrous war against the villains. Instead of bringing the heroes and the public together, The entire hero society fractured, and now the situation is worse than ever. So, these management department students are determined to show how Gentle, a former villain, is now here risking his life to protect the heroes. They want this message to go out across the country. Heroes, regular people, and even former villains can come together to protect the world from the real evil, from All for One and Shigaraki, and together they can create a better future. Gentle is impressed when he hears this, and he feels ashamed that he ever considered breaking into a school with such amazing students. Meanwhile, the management department students notice that their phones are no longer obeying their commands. They are being hijacked. We then realize that La Brava has already managed to restore the UA's flotation systems, and she is now hacking into the students' phones in order to broadcast their footage of Gentle live across the entire country. With the most passionate and loving look on her face, she declares that she can't let Gentle's legendary deeds go unseen by the rest of the world, even if he himself is fine with that. But even as the UA seems to be out of immediate danger, at least as far as crashing violently to the ground goes, the people inside the UA building are not out of danger yet. That's because those Twice clones who appeared as a result of Sadman's parade are still there and multiplying like crazy. And their goal just happens to be to slaughter every single hero. In fact, it looks like they're about to take at least 2 heroes down with them right now, as both Aizawa and Present Mike are forced off the UA platform by the Twice clones. And in that moment, it looks like Present Mike and Aizawa are about to plunge to their deaths. However, that is when Kurogiri, aka Oboro Shirakumo, recognizes them and realizes that he has to protect them. He then uses Warp Gate to rescue them before they crash to the ground. This is a major development, but at the same time though, we don't really know where Present Mike and Aizawa ended up because the portal just disappears after it takes them in. So while we can certainly assume that they are both alive, and we can also assume that Oboro is slowly waking up inside of Kurogiri, we also have to come to terms with the fact that erasing Shigaraki's quirks is now out of the question. Aizawa is now gone and we don't know where he is. So from this point forward, there will be no way of erasing Shigaraki's quirks. The villain will likely be at full power for the rest of the battle. The chapter then shifts focus back to Gunga, where All for One and even more Twice clones are still fighting against the heroes there, including of course Endeavor, Hawks, and several Class 1A students, among others. But before we get to that fight, can we take a second to talk about the fact that the management department at the UA actually exists? Basically, this department's job is to manage the heroics business, to deal with things like public relations, to manage hero agencies, to monitor public opinion about heroes, and stuff like that. They are literally just like business and marketing students. Am I remembering this wrong? Or did the manga not make a huge deal in the beginning about only powerful hero students being able to get into UA? And that is why Deku initially had no chance of getting in because he was quirkless. Like, from everything that we know about the management department, you don't need a quirk to be a part of it. So Deku totally could have joined this department even if he was quirkless. And then potentially he could try to get into one of the hero courses later on, like Shinso ended up doing. It's just a little side note, but I do find it weird how these guys who don't necessarily need to be strong or heroic themselves are still part of Japan's most prestigious hero school, the UA. Moving on, the situation at Gunga is also very dire as the Twice clones are swarming the battlefield and the heroes there, including Pixie Bob and others, are just absolutely getting overwhelmed. Hawks is still attempting to stop All for One from leaving Gunga and reaching Shigaraki. And in that moment, All for One is kind enough to provide us with a useful info dump that tells us exactly what he's up to. Essentially, Shigaraki's desire for destruction, the one that was born out of his tragic childhood, turned out to be much stronger than All for One had anticipated, and so he was unable to silence this part of Shigaraki's personality. As a result, he was unable to completely control and dominate his new vessel. But All for One also explains that once he forces Shigaraki to absorb All for One's quirk factor, his personality will be sealed away permanently and All For One will be able to dominate the new vessel. After all, he is the Demon Lord, and he believes that the Demon Lord is the real hero of this story. But Hawks refuses to accept that this is All For One's story, and despite being injured, he is still fighting desperately to keep All For One from reaching Shigaraki. Hawks is fighting for the sake of the future, for the sake of the next generation of heroes, and he refuses to let All For One win. For his part, All For One is already certain of victory, and he believes that the winds of fortune are blowing his way. In the next moment, All For One unleashes a quirk that seems to shred Hawks' body into pieces. Tokoyami screams out with tears in his eyes as Hawks turns into a character from Ouran High School Host Club and then disappears into nothing. And so, our boy Hawks is dead. Totally dead. Definitely 100% dead. Okay, I admit this got me for like a few seconds because I think that Hawks dying in this arc is possible. Especially if it's set up like a way for him to atone for his sins, including the betrayal and killing of Twice. But it turns out that this was not really Hawks who was torn to pieces by All For One. This was an illusion created by Kami from Shiketsu High. Because in that very moment, the Shiketsu students we met back in the Provisional Hero License exam arc arrive on the battlefield. As you might recall from back then, Kami has a quirk called Glamour, which allows her to create illusions of other people. Along with Kami, Inasa and Seiji from Shiketsu are also here, and Seiji had used his disgusting quirk to keep the real Hawks back, while Kami's illusion tricked All For One. Apparently, these Shiketsu students were supposed to escort the civilians who were evacuated from UA through the secret tunnels which led all the way to their school. But for some reason, these civilians never showed up. Because of this, the Shiketsu students figured that something was wrong and decided to come out and check things out. The Shiketsu guys are itching to fight All For One and the villains and to give some much needed backup to the heroes. As Inasa begins using his wind quirk to create a bunch of tornadoes that start blowing away those Twice clones, he asks All For One how dare he say that the winds of fortune are blowing his way when he, Inasa, is the one who makes the wind blow. And that is how this chapter ends. Honestly, straight up, this was a great one-liner by Inasa, and in general, this was a shocking and exciting entrance by the Shiketsu students. I mean, we all knew these guys would come back to the story at some point, because they're all quite powerful, especially Inasa, so it wouldn't make sense for them to stay out of the final battle completely. And I think the way they were brought back made perfect sense, but that's actually the most interesting part of this entire chapter for me. I mean, a lot of great stuff happened, the whole Kurogiri thing and everything else going on, but the fact that civilians from the UA who were supposed to be evacuated from the tunnels never showed up is really interesting. That is what we need to talk about right now, because I think we are about to finally meet Deku's father, and I will explain why. Okay, so many chapters ago, it was established that two of All For One's spies infiltrated the civilian evacuation shelters that were located on the UA grounds. These spies were sent by All For One apart from the traitor and his parents who were also there. Horikoshi also made it a point to have Skeptic mention several times how important it is for him to gain access to the evacuation shelter's security systems. Now, we just learned that these civilians at UA were supposed to be evacuated through the underground tunnels, and the Shiketsu students were supposed to escort them, but the evacuees never showed up. To me, this can only mean one thing. We know that All For One has many plans and backup plans, and one of these plans involves getting his hands on the civilians at the UA evacuation shelter. Now you might be thinking, why does he care about these civilians? But All For One likely knows that the parents of many of the hero students will be in these shelters, including of course Deku's own mother, Inko. And what better way to force Deku to obey you, and maybe even willingly give one for all to you, than by taking his own mother hostage and threatening her life unless Deku complies with your demands. We can't forget that All For One has been trying to steal One for All for literally generations. And he always failed because One for All can only be transferred with the consent of the current user. So, what if he's planning to blackmail Deku into consenting by threatening the person closest to him, his mother? And if this is what All for One is planning to do, and if this is where the story is going, then what better time to finally introduce Deku's father than right now? The story is ending. Time is running out, and Horikoshi promised that he would introduce Dekus Dad before the manga ends. He's kept all his other promises, like revealing the identity of the traitor, so there's no way that he just forgot about Dekus Dad. There are a lot of people who believe that Dekus Dad might be a villain, or even All for One himself. And if that is the case, then now is the time for him to reveal himself and lure Inko into a trap in order to blackmail Deku. But if Dekus Dad is not a villain and he's actually a normal guy, then the idea of All for One and the villains threatening Inko and the other evacuees is the perfect opportunity for Deku's father to make his grand entrance as he returns from abroad to defend his wife. I really get the feeling that All for One is in fact planning something with the civilians inside the UA shelter, and that this will be the moment that Horikoshi finally introduces us to Hisashi Midoriya. If I'm wrong, feel free to mock me in the comments of my future videos. I will gladly take the heat, but don't forget that in order to mock me, you have to subscribe and hit that notification button first so you don't forget about it later. What do you guys think? Am I right to think that the UA shelters are a part of All for One's plan? And is Dekus Dad about to be introduced? Let me know down below. If you're looking for a video to watch next, check out our growing MHA playlist. We got a ton of videos ready for you guys to view right now, and the link is on screen and in the description. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!